Episode 2: The education of a woman who thinks she knows 24 looks different from 20. Amanda Okafor had graduated, a second-class upper in economics, thank you very much, and was now working at a mid-sized consulting firm in Victoria Island where her suits were sharp, her heels were sharper, and her opinions on men had calcified into something close to science. She had dated 3 more men since Tunda. There was Emeka, who was charming in the way that only men who are charming to everyone can be, which is to say, the charm was not for her specifically. She discovered this when she showed up unannounced at his place and found another woman's shoes at the door. Expensive ones. More expensive than Amanda's. There was Soon, who loved her enormously for 3 months and then, seemingly overnight, needed space to find himself. He found himself, apparently, in a relationship with someone in Abuja before the month was out. And there was Michael, the one who seemed different because he used long words and quoted Malcolm X and talked about intentional relationships in a way that felt progressive and safe. Michael, as it turned out, was just better at disguising the same behavior as the others. He ran not 1 but 2 situationships simultaneously, of which Amanda was the second. 3 relationships, 3 lessons, 0 husbands. Amanda sat with Chinwe one Friday night over Chinese takeout and arrived at a conclusion. "I've been too soft," she announced. "I've been giving everything away and getting nothing in return." "Define everything," Chinwe said carefully. Amanda waved a chopstick. "You know. Time, attention, emotional availability, and," she paused, "other things." Chinwe looked at her. "Amanda, people say men stay when you give them what they want. When you make yourself," she searched for the word, "indispensable." "Who told you that?" Chinwe asked. "Twitter. It's logical." "It is absolutely not logical." But Amanda had already decided. She had done vulnerability. She had done patience. She had done waiting. Now she was going to try a different strategy, one that the world, specifically certain Instagram pages and a particular brand of relationship advice podcast, had been quietly endorsing. She would use intimacy as an anchor. She would make herself impossible to leave. The strategy, in short, failed catastrophically. What Amanda encountered instead were men who arrived with flattering speed, consumed what was offered, and departed with similar efficiency. The relationships were shorter, not longer. The pain was sharper, not duller. And the specific way these men looked at her, even the ones who claimed to care, began to feel different from how she wanted to be looked at. There was something in their eyes, a particular quality she couldn't name for a while. Then one evening, sitting alone after yet another man had vanished after 3 weeks, it came to her. They weren't looking at her like she was a person they wanted to keep. They were looking at her like something they had already gotten. She sat very still for a long time after that thought arrived. Then she called Chinwe and cried with the specific desperation of someone who has just understood something they didn't want to understand. 26. A new plan. If the world's men were broken, Amanda reasoned, perhaps the solution was the church men. The ones who wore suits to service and raised 2 hands during worship and used words like covenant and purpose-driven in regular conversation. She started attending Elevation Gospel Church, partly for the spiritual reboot and partly, if she was honest, because the men in the congregation looked stable in the particular way that suggested mortgages and retirement plans. She joined the choir, not because she had suddenly rediscovered her teenage singing voice, but because the choir director, a tall, confident man named Brother David, had mentioned during an introduction Sunday that he believed in intentional kingdom relationships. Amanda had heard that word before, intentional, but this time it was attached to kingdom, which felt like an upgrade. Brother David was everything she had been told to look for. He opened doors. He prayed before meals. He sent good morning scriptures. He referenced marriage conversations early in ways that felt like he had a plan. Amanda told Chinwe, who had recently given her life to Christ at a women's conference and was now Amanda's most enthusiastic prayer partner, "I think he's the one." "Have you prayed about it?" Chinwe asked. "I've thought about it very hard," Amanda replied. "That's not the same thing." "It's similar." It was not similar. By month 4, the cracks were visible, not dramatic ones, but the subtle, persistent kind. David cancelled plans frequently and always had a reason that sounded spiritual. He spoke about what he deserved in a wife with such specificity and frequency that Amanda began to feel less like a potential partner and more like a candidate being assessed for a role she didn't fully understand. Then came the Sunday she arrived early for choir practice. She heard his voice from behind the door, not singing, but talking. Low, warm, familiar. She heard a woman laugh. The specific kind of laugh that women do not laugh with men they are not comfortable with. She opened the door. Brother David and Sister Ngozi, the alto section lead, jumped apart with a speed that was, in itself, a full confession. Amanda, David started. Amanda looked at him for 3 very long seconds. Then she looked at the choir robe hanging neatly on the peg behind him. Then she looked at his hands, the same hands that had just led 100 people into worship 2 Sundays ago. Church position, she said quietly, is not the same as character. She left, quietly, dignified, then sat in her car for 45 minutes and had the kind of cry that reorganizes your face. In a final attempt at due diligence, Amanda briefly dated 2 men who were, she would acknowledge later, genuinely good. Genuinely faithful. Genuinely sincere. One talked about crop rotation for 45 minutes on their second date. The other carried a Bible everywhere, including to a birthday party, and spent the journey home reading it aloud in the Uber while Amanda stared out the window and tried to feel something other than boredom. She wasn't proud of her assessment. But she was honest. Why are the genuine ones so? She struggled for a kind word. Boring. Chinwe supplied, then immediately added, not that boring is bad. Boring is safe. Boring doesn't cheat. I know that logically. Amanda pressed her fingers to her temples. I want someone who loves God and knows how to have a conversation that doesn't involve soil pH levels. Those men exist. Then where are they? Because I have searched every section of the church. The choir, the ushers, the media team. I briefly considered the security guard, Amanda, before discovering he has a wife in Enugu. Chinwe was quiet for a moment. Maybe the problem isn't finding the right man. Then what is the problem? But Chinwe didn't answer that night. She just looked at her friend with the gentle, particular look of someone who knows something she isn't sure the other person is ready to hear. She would answer it soon, though. Because God was about to send someone who would answer it better than she ever could. To be continued in episode 3.